Sparkle a Day with Dr. Amanda. Today is Wisdom Wednesday, which is the day that I get to talk in between guests and about our theme of the week, which this week is leadership, how to have hard conversations, one of my favorites. YouTube, watching this, please like, share, subscribe, tell a friend. There's all kinds of fun every week. And the purpose of this podcast and YouTube channel is to empower people, to share stories that will help other people overcome mindsets. It could be in areas of relationships, family, friendship, leadership, mental health, overcoming trauma, any type of areas for work involvement, and again, anything to do with community. So today we're going to talk about a topic that's dear to me, which is having hard conversations. And having hard conversations isn't always easy for everybody. Hard conversations can be when having to talk to family or friends, and it could be a range of different communication. It could be on talking about racism. It can be talking about concerns. So it could be talking about how you felt during a conversation. And I think this will also piggyback into another favorite topic of mine, which is the difference between gossip, complaining, and venting, and what does that look like? And that'll be one of my other talks, but I love it because it's all in leadership and how we continue to evolve. If you're in the middle of something, sometimes the best thing to do is when I'm in a conversation, I'm starting to get upset about something, I should be noticing myself, how am I doing? Is this something that is triggering something from the past? How is a person doing? Am I safe? Am I feeling comfortable? And also noticing the other person, because a lot of times, and even from scientific research, cortisol, when we're upset and we get to anger, there may be things that are happening, or maybe perhaps past events that also impact how we're feeling in the moment. Sometimes, not always, but a lot of times. And that takes a while for that to come down. So if you're in a conversation, and perhaps usually what I try to do when I'm having a hard conversation is stop and pause, and then ask questions, and then wait for a response. But if that isn't working, and again, I'm just saying for the most extreme cases, sometimes you need to say, you know what, I want to have this conversation with you and observe what you notice. I'm noticing that we're both seeming to be really upset by this topic. And, it may seem like we probably talk about this at a different time. What are your thoughts? Or you just say that, and perhaps the other person will agree. And if they don't, you could say, we can certainly have this conversation at a different time. If perhaps, and I apologize if you're not upset about it, but I certainly am not in the right space. And I want to make sure I'm in the right space that when we talk, I can hear you and communicate well. And so you can own your part. And again, maybe perhaps if you know the person or you don't, they're offended by you saying that, you could always own saying you're upset and that you'd rather do that at a different time. And then make a point then, if you're the one that's ending it and both of you don't agree, that you talk to that person and say, hey, can we talk later this week? Or, hey, I've had some time to reflect. I think we can have a conversation, right? And that's good. That's ownership, that's reflecting, and that's being able to know yourself and what you're able to do. Another good key, and I know we've had amazing interviews. We had Tamika, who talks about hard conversation. We have Juan, and again, all with different backgrounds and different when you're thinking and listening, you want to listen to the person. You want to stay to the facts of what's happening, and not really that blame shifting, right? Just the facts of what happened and then being able to listen. And also, I know Tamika talked about having questions. So can you clarify that? Can you explain to me, I did say this, can you explain why you thought it meant this, right? So you want to clarify from what the person said or what you said or what they're saying you said that perhaps was misunderstood. And those are really important points when you're looking at how to have hard conversations. Another important point is this, and this is something that I learned that's so important and I do well with over time because I want to continue to grow in this, that I'll admit that there's sometimes, depending on the people or the nature of the relationship, that it may be a little bit more challenging, so you're continuing to grow with it. One area is when you're talking to somebody and say you need to say how you felt. So let's just practice. We'll go with Winnie the Pooh, right? Winnie the Pooh, no one knows Winnie the Pooh. So Winnie the Pooh, when we were talking about how to begin that project, I felt not heard, and I felt like my opinion wasn't heard, and I also felt upset and frustrated and hurt by that. And so then you can just tell the person what happened from the event, how you felt. Now, if the other person says, well, you know what, life's tough, and sometimes that happens, and you know what, my way was best. Okay, so they spoke. What you can choose to do then, you already spoke, you already said, at this event, I felt this way, and you shared your feelings, and feelings are how you feel. They're not, no one, the other person can't change how you felt in that moment. It's how you felt. And so if the other person disregards how you spoke, or they're, more defensive about it, you have two choices. The one is to say nothing at all because you already said what you had to say. And that's exactly it. You already said how you felt. That person is clearly not hearing you on that conversation. Now, if it's just you and it's a partner in a business, it's a little different. You already shared it. But if you share it again, you are going to, if you repeat it, you're basically repeating what you already said, and they're just not hearing you. Now, the other way, which I personally wouldn't recommend, is starting to have a conversation with the person and saying, well, you didn't hear me, and this is what I said, and that's just ridiculous, and getting upset. What you're basically doing is exerting energy at the other person, and A, they're not hearing you. B, you already said something, and if they choose to respond in a very dishonoring or rude manner, that's their response, but how you choose to respond matters even more. So when they do that, you don't want to be disrespected. And again, in that moment, you can pause. And then if you need to say, I felt, I did share how I felt, that I felt disrespected then. And then if they continue to yell, all you're going to continue to do is almost like a ping pong match where you're just going to be back and forth. And you have to decide in that moment, is that worth it? And so you can have those conversations with them and say you were the person that waited, and then you had the conversations. You shared how you felt, you shared how it made you feel. If the other person disregards it, and you can say, you're, disregarding it, and you keep your calm, but you responded. You can't force anybody else to respond how you'd like. It would be nice, sometimes if people could be in the same space, but you might be in a different place where you can admit when you do that, or say you're the one that's getting the feedback from another person. That might make you upset to hear that. But for you, you would want to respond by saying, I hear what you're saying. I'm sorry you felt that way. I didn't realize that. And being able to listen, right? So if you're the other person, and that takes that communication skills, being able to hear the person. Now, again, that's one example, and there's many complexities to it. It could be on, having to talk about somebody who forgot to do something, or talking about, a hard issue, or they're asking you for advice and then they don't want to hear it. So there's many things, but what matters is how you respond and your response after. And you have the only control you have in situations when you're having conversations is your response. And yes, there are times where we can certainly talk to people and it comes around and we're able to have, ask questions and it diffuses the situation. But there are other situations where if we want to diffuse it, even if we did, the other person, it may be due to other trauma, it may be due to just their pain, that they're not able to hear. So anything you're saying, it may escalate even if you don't want it to. And so having that calmness or not responding may help. So perhaps they might come around and then you can have a conversation later that day or another day. But sometimes it may happen where it constantly happens because, again, until that person's able to look at what's going on inside, it's going to be hard to do that. And so I just want to encourage you, for any hard conversations, first, we want to know who we are, what we bring to the table. We want to know what brings us a 0 to 10, right? If something that is unjust or offensive to us, and we want to know how to respond. However, it's so important to have that. A lot of people try to avoid conversations. I'm one who likes to address it and talk about it and bring it up and say, I'm sorry. I want to say, I own this. This is something I did. And sometimes if you're that person that wants to address it, the other person may not. Like, they're not used to that. They think confrontation thing is terrible versus an actual conversation. For me, I feel like conversations, even if they're harder, it's important. And again, when we're having those conversations, knowing that we may not hear what we want to hear, and also dealing with that within ourselves. So sometimes you'll have people that want to address it and talk to each other, and then sometimes you'll have people that don't. And learning when they want to or their style is important. But again, addressing it is important. And it's part of leadership and it's part of us growing. And that can be really, really challenging. And so I want to encourage you out there, if you're part of the audience, if you have a hard time with hard conversations or talking about it, or it really is painful and perhaps sometimes we have done something and it's hard to own it, or we're so embarrassed, or we're hurt, or we're so sad we hurt the other person. Having those conversations is still important. And again, we're also different. Like for me, I like to have that on the table and say, okay, how can we address this? And sometimes it's hard to do because even for me, if I'm with other people that like to do that too, but you can tell it's really tough because both of you are going to have to come to the table with humility and talking and listening. That can encourage you out there. You know, there's going to be hard conversations we have. And a lot of times relationships or areas of our lives are ruined because we didn't have those hard conversations, or people don't know how to, because even in families, right? There's a lot of times in families, we just don't have them. We don't talk about our feelings. We don't talk about how we're doing with hard conversations. In families, we just get angry and argue, and then there's a continual cycle until we change the pattern. And a lot of times the pattern is just that. We're changing our response. So instead of, you know, if someone says, hey, you did this 10 years ago, and then I could respond saying, well, you did this 10 years ago, right? Like that type of thing, that leads nowhere. Because what it is bringing up past things that, again, if we haven't addressed before, we're bringing up now. And yes, there may be patterns that people have, but we're addressing what happened in the situation, not what happened 10 years ago, not what happened 20 years ago, or even a month ago, because that is our responsibility to address it, so that if we're concerned or it's hurting us, that we can say, when this happens, this hurts, move forward without that happening. And again, if you have people that continue to do that, it's also for you to evaluate and say, you know, if that's in relationships or with other people, they're not hearing you. And again, it takes time, but you also, valuing yourself, need to decide, do I want to be in relationships with people who aren't hearing me, or continue to bring back that blame game? And that can be hard to change, but there is hope to change it. So again, you know, when we're having difficult conversations, that could be with a significant other, it could be with friends, it could be with family, it could be with children, or in your workforce. And knowing how to do that takes some time and effort. And a lot of times it's so much easier for people not to have hard conversations, but to talk about people without coming to the person. And we are going to talk about how to have those difficult or hard conversations as we continue to move forward. Juan and Tamika, they really talked about, you know, making sure you state the facts, listening to people, and always giving them opportunities to grow. You know, even if it's goal setting, or if you're in that group, well, how can we move forward, right? How can we move forward from the situation? And also making sure you're safe and the other person's safe. Like the biggest thing is the responses. Sponsors saying, I need to talk about this later, once in a while, right? Depending on how I am, or if it's like an area where I was still having my heart being healed from different things in the past, I may have responded back. And that's never good, because what happens is you just have this ping pong and you're basically trying to control the situation, or having that response to say, well, let me defend myself. And the reality is, a lot of times we don't have to defend ourselves. We can share what happened, how we felt, admit our mistakes, and then move forward. So I really learned over time to really diffuse it, to ask open-ended questions like how can we move forward? You know, what did you hear? What does that mean? And really trying to ask and hear the other person and being able to respond to. And that makes it open, and that you can talk with each other. So again, I hope you enjoyed this. Hopefully you got some daily doses of wisdom. I always love to hear your wisdom as well. So we had wisdom from, you know, Tamika, and she has some books that I have posted from her podcast and her YouTube, and Juan had some books on leadership. And so again, they both have some great, you know, sites. You even had one-on-one coaching. And so Tamika also does a lot with parenting and coaching. And again, you know, in my capacity with consulting for education and doing other work, I do a lot with looking at that. So I hope you enjoyed this segment. And again, we're always continuing to grow. So I want you just to know that you're amazing and incredible. And if this is an area that you're growing in, I am cheering you on. And we're always growing in this area. So I hope you continue to have hard conversations, continue to seek out some great tips. On Friday, we'll talk about some great tips and techniques for you to use. Be well, and I'll see you tomorrow for some more daily doses of wisdom.